This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net. It is time for your purpose, your power, your journey to authenticity. And today is the day before Autism Awareness Month. And what I want to say to everybody, every day should be Autism Awareness Day. We should be aware of it because the majority of our children appear to be on the spectrum. And whether that is just a flip diagnosis that a doctor may make or not, I think we need to understand what that spectrum really looks like. When my son was diagnosed back in the mid 90s, it was 1 out of 150. And nobody really seemed to know what to do. Everybody was guessing. There was lots of medication being thrown around, and maybe only 1 or 2 types of therapies that they believed worked. My guest today is Paul Voss, and Paul is a dad who is very involved with his children and especially understanding what it means to be a parent of a child on the spectrum. So, Paul, take us on your journey and tell us how it all began and how you educated yourself.
Sure. So, my youngest daughter, we have 8 children. My youngest daughter, May, was born in March 2020, so right at the peak of COVID. We're in Connecticut. It was a crazy time. I wasn't sure if I was even going to be able to be in the hospital. So we ended up getting induced just to make sure I could be there because I've been there for the other 7. I did not want to miss my child's birth.
Sure.
And everything actually went great with the birth. So she was born completely healthy. It was the shortest stay we've ever had because they wanted to get us out of the hospital, which was great. So we got home. And then January 2022, I'll never forget, COVID hit our house. My wife and I, it was awful for both of us. My 7 older kids got it and they were sick maybe 24 hours over it. My youngest also got it. And one of the things we saw right away was sleep just went completely awry. She would not fall asleep at night. So, 10, 11, 12, we'd finally get her to fall asleep. If we got her to fall asleep, the maximum amount of sleep we would get is maybe 2 hours. And then she'd be up for 45 minutes to an hour. She'd want to go downstairs. She'd want to watch TV, eat food. And both my wife and I, at 3 in the morning, neither of us are wanting to go
I,
downstairs and, make a meal or put on the TV. That was really the beginning part of where we thought something was off. Admittedly, I knew nothing about autism, um, especially as you mentioned before, the spectrum and how complex it is. So, one of the other things that started to happen over time was she still wasn't talking. She had a few words, but those words started to go away. So during the summer of 2022, we decided to do speech therapy. And Connecticut has a program called Birth to Three, where a specialist comes out to your house. The very first time she came out, she said, "Have you had her checked for autism?" And it hit me and my wife pretty hard. We started researching right away even more about autism. I mean, I was so naive that even though I had a suspicion it could be autism, I thought there's no way she can be nonverbal because she makes sounds. I had no idea that,
I,
non-speaking nonverbal is very different than just making sounds. So I had admittedly a ton to learn during that time. Leading up to the getting the test done, it takes a while to get actual confirmation. I was actually optimistic that it would be autism. And the only reason I say that is because I wanted to get the diagnosis and then start working on it.
right.
Um, Again, I had no idea how hard it is to deal with. And we ended up obviously getting the diagnosis of autism, and it sent us on a journey. There was something that kind of happened in parallel that opened my eyes and really wanted me to get more involved. So my mom had schizophrenia my whole life, and she was institutionalized from about the time I was in second grade. And things actually got really bad for her during COVID too. She ended up contracting COVID in her home, the group home, and when she was going to be removed to the hospital, she was very confused and ended up fighting back against the people removing her, and she ended up going to jail, which was
Oh,
crazy. So we had to prove that she wasn't mentally competent, which was pretty easy to do just based on her history. But the other thing that happened during that time is her social worker sent me just a list of all the medications she was on. And I remember reading it and then also looking at just what she is unable to do. And I remember just thinking, like, why is she on all this medication if she can't even operate a vending machine? Ironically, also during that time, just listening to podcasts, I had heard that the keto diet can help people with schizophrenia. And I never knew that. It was never an option for my mom. And I just remember thinking, could it have made a difference? So when my daughter got her diagnosis, I had already kind of had that happen in the background. And I wanted to just make sure we looked at all options and really pursue, natural healing as well.
sure.
One of the first things that really blew my mind and changed my perspective as well. My wife had told me about this concept called grounding or earthing, where the earth has natural energy in it. Walking around barefoot can help heal with inflammation. I thought, even at that point, I'm like, this doesn't sound real to me. There's no way. So I decided to read a book about it. After reading the book, I got pretty excited. I'll never forget because we bought a grounding mat on Amazon. The first night, my daughter slept 6 hours straight, right?
Wow.
It didn't fix the issues going to sleep, but consistently, she started sleeping 6 hours every night as soon as we added the grounding mat. And I thought, wow, like this is crazy. And at that point, I also wanted to tell everybody about it because I'm like, I wish we would have known this a year earlier because it could have really taken a lot of the stress off
Sure.
our marriage, parenting. I think sleep is foundational too. So not getting sleep is not going to help my daughter heal in other ways. So I was really inspired then. Okay, I want to learn as much as I can about helping my daughter, but I also want to share as much as I can with other parents to try to help them.
Interestingly enough, the information that we get, whether it's about autism or any other kind of life issue, the best way to get it is by sharing what you're going through. And for many, many years, I know growing up, my mother used to use the phrase, don't hang out your dirty laundry for the neighbors to see, meaning don't share these things because people are going to look at you oddly. And, that may be the case. But when you hear something, you then have a choice as a human to either check it out further and see if it works for you, or to say, that's a bunch of garbage. I'm not interested. I'll go find something else. And I know when my son was diagnosed, there wasn't a lot, like I said, out there. ABA was about the biggest thing. And we realized after 2 or 3 appointments that my son was much higher functioning than they thought because he sat there and said to the therapist, I'm not doing this junk. I am not a dog. You are not going to reward me with a treat. And we all just sat there like, oh, you like figured this out and you're 6 years old. Um, and he sort of led the way for us. He sort of showed us what he needed. So when you go back to this grounding mat, I've heard so much about it. I've also heard about the barefoot walking, which I do a lot, but I've done more in the last couple of weeks after I lost my husband. And when I feel stressed, even when it's been ice cold outside, I will go outside, take a couple of steps, whether it's the jolt of the cold or the change. I can just feel myself say, okay, I got to make a change. So, how did this work for your daughter? I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, but what did you start to notice with more sleep and being true to the ground?
Sure. We noticed just more regulation, and again, it didn't fix everything. So there were a lot of other things we did over time, but just getting that sleep. Yeah, I don't know if it impacted my wife and I more than her because we were also more patient, less stressed. but it did create more peace in our household overall. And it really allowed us, gave us that foundation to start building on other things, right? Because until we really fix sleep, I felt like we can't fix other things. So after we kind of got the sleep under control, then it was okay, how do we help her fall asleep faster? How do we used to have to carry her everywhere as well. So walks around the block, going to the grocery store, we had to carry her everywhere. And I would say the other big impact it had on me, it really forced me to change my perspective on some other things that I had been holding off on. Um, One was melatonin. I did not want to give her that, just based on things I had read. And we had two specialists who I trust a lot, both recommend it. So I was like, okay, I need to reconsider melatonin. We added that in. That helped her start falling asleep faster. The good news is she's not on melatonin anymore. So I know there's a lot of news, there's people pro and against.
Yep.
All I can tell you is we did it and she did not become dependent on it. So that was a good part of the story. The other thing I had to change, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. The other big thing for me was CBD oil. Again, we had that recommended by people we trust. I had a perspective that I don't really want to give it to my daughter. I'm pretty open on, things, but I felt like I don't want to give that to her. But we gave it to her, and I'll never forget because first day we went for a walk and she walked all by herself, and we haven't had to carry her ever since. So for me, in some ways, I was actually preventing things from happening by not keeping an open mind on what could really help her.
And one of the things I'm hearing is we know there's no cure for autism, but there are things that we can do to minimize some of the symptoms and minimize what the outside world may see as oddities. Um, we want our children to be integrated as best as they can because our children do grow into being adults. And they may be cute at 2 and 4 and 6 years old, but at 10 years old, when they're having their meltdowns, if we don't understand them, it's not cute at all. In fact, I had family members who said to me one day, your child is just out of control. And I said to them, well, let's talk about why he just went into a meltdown. And they'd go, no, he had a meltdown and he had a meltdown. And oftentimes it would happen around my mother. My mother would just want to please him so much. She'd say, would you like a cookie? He'd say no. Would you like a brownie? And she'd keep adding and adding to the point that he was so overwhelmed, he went into meltdown. I said, if mom would learn not to ask him what he wants and let him ask, you probably wouldn't see the meltdown. And it took a while for the family to start to understand that. And it took a long time for my mother to get it because, well, I do it for my other grandchildren. Speaking of that, you had 7 other kids. How do they relate to your daughter?
They've really grown, I would say, and you want to raise children that are caring and love others, but I do think having a sister that is level 3 autism has made them more caring. One example we've seen is my daughter who's in 4th grade. We had gotten a letter home from the school last year that she purposely would go become friends with younger kids who are special needs. Like I don't think she would have done that before. I mean, she's just a loving person, but hear that, it makes you so happy as a parent. The other thing that really helped us was we made diet changes. So we went gluten-free, dairy-free initially. Now we've modified it over time. But my oldest son was diagnosed with ADHD, and we went the traditional route. We actually put him on Adderall, and within a week, he started talking about suicide. So we pulled him off of it after meeting with his pediatrician. And at that point, we decided we were just going to try to manage it ourselves. We really didn't make a lot of progress, but the diet changes that we made for her, obviously with the other 7 kids, you can't have the other food in the house, so we just
Right.
did it as a family, and benefited him tremendously. So he no longer gets any accommodations at school and is an honor student. So I think even he can see like, hey, there's good things that have come out of this, but they've just become, I think, more caring, more understanding. There's still times we have to remind them like, hey, she operates differently, right? Like you just need to give her some space. But they love her so much, and I think they just want to be around her. She really like lights up a room and has brought so much joy to the family.
So a couple of things you said there. Your kids seem to be more empathetic, and I noticed that with my son as well. That when he knew that he was, as he said, different, um, he wanted to share that. He wanted to let people know why he was different, not to make an excuse, but to say, "Hey, this is who I am." He also started speaking engagements when he was 12 years old because he said, I don't want there to be a cure for autism because without autism, I wouldn't be who I am today. And at 12 years old, this mother just stood there crying her eyes out because, I was looking for that magic pill. I just wanted everything to be resolved. Um, and then I learned from him what he needed. And it sounds like that's what your youngest is doing too. She's showing you that, she wants to be around these other children. And yet it sounds like she also integrates very well into what we call normal life because she's got 7 brothers and sisters that she could model after. But that's also a lot of work for you and your wife. And I hope somebody out there is listening doesn't think, oh, Karen, you don't think parents should be doing this? No, I think they should. But with 8 children, your oldest ADHD, so that's something that you need to, understand. Now your youngest, you and your wife are working, trying to make a life, trying everything to be integrated. Where do you get time for yourself? Because you have to.
Yeah, I try to be very intentional. So for me, it's waking up early. And a lot of the things that we do, for her, we'll integrate into our life, or, we'll try things out first for ourselves to see like, okay, is this something that's helpful? Like one of the things we added for her was a sauna. So got an infrared sauna. That has also helped a lot. But, I make sure to carve out 30 minutes for me every day in it. You mentioned walking barefoot. I do the same thing, or I'll go for a walk with her barefoot. So just trying to find ways to carve out time for myself. My wife needs to be better about it. She's, always, looking for that magic pill as well because she wants to help our daughter. But the sauna too for her has been very helpful. And then we enjoy like just spending time with our kids. So going to their games, going to their events, like those are things that I just try to be in the moment. I try to bring her to as much as I can, just so she is integrated in there. But I do love spending time with my kids, so it makes it easier that way. But sauna
Yeah.
for me has been a game changer, and just carving out those 30 minutes a day has really helped me overall.
I know that was something that my husband and I did. Now, we only had the one at home at the time. My oldest was already away at school, so uh, he wasn't living here. But my husband, who is not a sports guy, because our son Alex wanted to play t-ball and soccer, and he wanted to play football, but we said no to that. My husband got involved. He started coaching. He didn't know the first thing about anything, okay? Um, and he really hadn't spent a lot of time around a group of young kids. And all of a sudden we found we had the time to do this. And the best part of it was is that we got to see our son integrate to the best of his ability. And when it wasn't the right thing for him, one of us was always there to be on the sidelines for him. But again, back in the 90s and early 2000s, community was not as receptive as they are today. What is it like for you and your wife when you take your daughter out and maybe there's too much sensory going on around her, or she just doesn't want to be there and maybe panics? How do you resolve that?
It's funny. Just last night, I took one of my daughters to lacrosse, and I brought her with me. And the way it's set up, you have to walk by a playground to get to the lacrosse field. And my youngest sees a playground, and she wants to go immediately. So I explained to her we're going to walk down, but then we'll go back. But she didn't like that answer. So um, I kind of just go with the flow. So I'm walking down. She starts crying and meltdown. I did pick her up and just hug her and tell her I love her, and we're going to go back to the playground. I am sure every parent is looking at me like, what's going on here? But I don't let it bother me anymore. There was there was one time that really crushed me as a dad, and that was before we had the diagnosis. I took her to an end of year school party for one of my kids. My wife was volunteering in another classroom, so I took my youngest May and I woke her up from her nap. She seemed a little upset, but we went into the school. When we got into the classroom, she looked at me like she didn't even know who I was. And she ended up going to another mom to have another random mom hold her and basically calm her down. Yeah, I felt like the worst dad ever then. And kind of after that, I just kind of, I'm like, I don't really care what other people think anymore. Um, the one part that is hard though is when other kids come up to her and talk to her and she doesn't respond. Um, they might look at her like she's different. So that part is hard. I'll explain to the kid, oh, she doesn't communicate the same way as you. But yeah, I've kind of gotten used to it, and I guess it sounds awful saying, but I really don't care anymore, like what other people like. They can look at me funny, they can judge me. I really don't care because for my daughter, it's more about just making sure she's comfortable. And she's
Absolutely.
gotten way better, but playgrounds are still something I think that she wants to just go to. So
Hey, I can't blame her.
yes,
If you're not on the field playing lacrosse or you don't care about the game, you'd rather be on the swings and slide.
yes.
So uh, it's only recently that I've started liking sports. So I can totally understand. I would have given anything 5 years ago not to have to sit and watch a sports game. But my youngest is working in the sports field, and I've had to readjust my thinking. Got to support him in his career. Um, how old is May now?
She just turned 6 last Friday.
She's just 6 years old. And like I said, there's no cure, but there are modifications that will help her as she gets older. I'll never forget my son's neurologist when my son was 10 or 11, and that was his toughest period. Um, the neurologist sat us down with my son there, and he goes, Alex, by the time you're 25, you may not even know you're on the spectrum. And I sort of laughed because he was having one meltdown after another at school. Now, I did laugh in front of my son, but I laughed internally. It was like, sure, this could happen. Um, but it did happen. Wasn't quite 25. I think he was more like 27. Um, but for him, and again, every person on the spectrum is different. But for him, all of a sudden, he had gotten his college degree. He had been working in a field that he wanted to work in. And he woke up one morning and realized, I got to do something more than what I'm doing now. Part-time work is not going to be my answer. And all of a sudden, it was like he knew how to flip that switch. He took all of his learning. And that's not to say that he doesn't need assistance occasionally. It's not to say that medication occasionally is something that he may need, but he was able to take the tools that he learned all through the years. I've been able to do the same thing by not just jumping in and trying to protect him, because at 6, you can protect your daughter.
Yeah.
But at 26, it may be a little bit more difficult. So you mentioned that your wife doesn't take much time for herself, and I totally get it. And for the other mothers out there listening, you have to, because if you don't, it's going to reflect on your child. And that's not putting your wife down in any way. It's just a reminder, because I did not take care of myself. And my son's worst days were the days when I was overwhelmed, because I was his key person. So just keep that in mind. Now we're going into Autism Awareness Month. Do you find the month of April more meaningful to you, or do you, like me, wish it was an everyday occurrence?
I do wish it was an everyday occurrence, because it's great they have a month, but I think there's still just so much misunderstanding about what autism is, what it isn't, and a month is, a lot of it just feels like marketing to me,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, I agree. And today I read that the newest numbers is 1 out of 37. And it's more boys than it is girls, but we're finding more girls now because parents are coming forward. And what the article I was reading was saying that parents were okay taking their sons for the diagnosis, but they didn't feel comfortable taking their daughters. Fathers wanted to believe their daughter was their princess, beautiful, nothing was wrong. And mothers were so confused because they wanted their daughters to be just like them. And the reality of it is, I don't care how so-called normal we are, we're all different.
Yes.
I may have character traits of my parents and I have their DNA, but my DNA has changed with their DNA. And the same thing as we pass it on to our children. What would you tell parents who are out there who are saying, well, did you stop at 8 because she had autism, or did you stop at 8 because you chose to stop at 8?
It's a funny story, actually, because we were supposed to stop at 7. I had a procedure scheduled, and the week that I was supposed to go, my wife said, "Are you sure you want to go through with it?" And I said, "You don't need to talk me out of it. I'm good." So after she was born, before before we had seen any signs,
Yeah,
um, I had went and gotten it done. So we were done then anyway. So it was just funny to me, though, the fact that, originally we weren't even planning to have an 8. And like you said, the fact that she is a girl, that her 7 other siblings don't have autism. Um, like the odds of even her having it are so slim when you look at just the numbers. So to me, it's just been crazy that this happened. And, but like I said, she's taught us more than anyone ever could.
absolutely. And it's interesting because my husband, my in-laws always used to say, Richard marches to the beat of a different drummer. And they would always, from the day they met me, it was, he's got these oddities, Karen, just to know about it. And I sort of noticed them, but it was like, okay, so he was quirky, no big deal. When he was 55 years old, he got diagnosed that he was on the autism spectrum. I cannot tell you how happy he was that day. Number one, it gave him an understanding of himself that was so much better. It gave him a better understanding of our son, because, the only difference was he said, well, I do that. Why can't he do that? And we had to even remind my husband, you're both on the spectrum, but you're still both different. But the interesting part is that he lived 55 years not knowing, being successful. And for his 55th birthday, he decided to go back to college, because now he said, I know that I can learn, but I may need to learn differently. And so he got the tools he needed, went to grad school, and graduated with honors. And it was something that he could finally say to other people. I may be on the spectrum. I've lived a full life, and I know how to learn now. So let's talk about her learning. You call her nonverbal, but like you said, she does make sounds. Some nonverbal individuals all of a sudden one day start speaking out of the blue.
Yes.
Is she still going to speech therapy?
She does do speech. We do homeschool her now. So she did do through our public school, she did preschool last year. It wasn't really the right fit for her. Our goals just didn't align with their goals. So we've been homeschooling. We're doing spelling as well. So spell to communicate. It's been incredible to see her grow there. And she's technically would be in kindergarten in public school. She's in kindergarten and homeschool, but seeing her spell is just amazing to see.
Yep. And does she use an iPad to communicate?
She does. We've been back and forth on that because my struggle with the iPad is my goal is for her to talk. So I don't want to give something that could limit her speaking, but we do use the iPad to allow her to share maybe what she needs or wants. And then we do the spelling board, for lessons now, but our goal would be that she could use that eventually to kind of share her thoughts as well.
Absolutely. And I brought the iPad up for a very important reason. I was at a Starbucks the other day, and there was a young child who was using it for communication. And there was another woman sitting there, and she was talking to her friend saying, I don't understand why a child has to walk around with one of those things all the time. All they're doing is playing games. And I saw what they were doing. And I very nicely just turned over and I said, that's how she communicates. She's not playing a game. And they looked at me, oh, how would you know? So I gave them a couple references. And I said, but please don't judge. I said, one of the things that my son did, and this is really before iPads, when we would go out with him, we knew that if he got out of sorts, what was best for him. So he had a Game Boy with only 2 games on it, and neither one of them were, high impact games. Mm-hmm. But we knew if we were sitting somewhere and he just started to go into meltdown or he was too tired, I took it out of my purse and handed it to him. He was content because his tiredness, his meltdown was communicating to us, I can't handle being here. Give him something that he could handle, he could go with the flow. That's why it's so important for us to learn about our children.
Yes.
So who's doing the homeschooling, you or mom?
Mom's doing the homeschooling.
So mom's taking care of the other 7. She's taking care of the house. She's doing the homeschool. I'm
yes.
just giving you a hard time. Are you getting out and speaking to groups now? What is your plan to get your message out?
I've been doing a lot of podcasts. I have been invited to speak to some groups. But my goal is 2 things, right? If I can help one parent get sleep, but then also for those that are kind of knee deep in maybe what they think is the worst part of their life, like share some of the good things that have come out of it to give them some hope that it's not as bad as either you think it is or as it seems at any time.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the important. Yes. My husband and I didn't for a long time. And we lost a lot of friends. That was our own fault. And our family was our son, my mother-in-law, and that was it. And when we would go out, we made sure my mother-in-law came along with us because it was another body if we needed it. And Alex and his grandmother were the best of buddies, so he was always glad to have her. But asked for help. We didn't, and by the time we finally did, it took a while for our son to accept it because he thought we were angry with him. And we had asked for respite help. And so a couple times he'd be taken out of the house just for a night, and he'd go kicking and screaming. And until he understood, hey, you can go have fun here. Mom and dad are letting you go have fun here. Yeah. We didn't say that we needed to go to sleep, but that's exactly what we did. But we didn't know how to communicate that with him. And when we finally did, he loved it. It was the best thing for him. So please, everybody, ask for help. There are organizations out there. And Paul, can people reach out to you if they have questions?
They can. The best way is on Instagram, Paul, and then V, and then it's actually my last name, OSS, but it's 055 because there was another Paul Voss on Instagram, but
Okay.
that's the best way. Yeah, that's definitely the easiest way to reach out to me.
Well, we'll put that in the show notes for sure. And for those of you who are celebrating Autism Awareness Month, let's take this into May, June, July, and keep going. Let's get the right information out there, and know that you're not alone. There are a lot of us parents out there, either with very young children or even grown children, that need your support. And if anybody is looking for additional support, please contact me at New Cleveland Radio, and we will connect you. Thank you, Paul, for joining me this morning, and give all 8 kids and your wife a big hug from us.
Definitely will. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.